Seoul time and 3 o'clock in Bangkok time. People are coming in. Welcome to the special panel on COVID-19 pandemic and democracy. My name is Anselmo Lee. I'm from Seoul, Korea. I'm here as an advisor to ADN. At the same time, I'm also teaching at the university as an adjunct professor. I just want to let you know, we are using Zoom, but not everybody can appear in the screen, because we have received more than 100. So those who appear, the screen is only the moderator, speaker, and discussants. And the rest are they can watch the screen, but they cannot speak in screen, So they can write down in the chatting room. So I will pick up your questions after presentation. I hope it's okay, Sorry, because we have received more than expected. That's why this is the only way to accommodate everybody. Okay. So welcome once again to this panel discussion. Just let me explain the background of this panel. This is organized by Korea Association of Human Rights Studies, which is in South Korea, in partnership with the ADN, Asia Democracy Network, which is composed of several regional NGOs, including the Forum Asia, and MFA, and many others. This is the sixth, the meeting on COVID-19, because we started more than 1 month ago as an informal sharing about different experiences, different countries, the last 5 times. And then we decided to go into the more thematic, regional rather than country. So this is the first thematic panel discussion on pandemic and the democracy. So today is a democracy, but we want to continue with the more thematic issues related to the democracy, civil society, and then pandemic. So now we have 3 speakers. The first one by Sue, we call Sue from ADN. And she will speak about overall overview of the COVID-19 and state democracy as to put us in the context. And the second speaker will be Joseph Civicus, based in Malaysia, but Civicus headquarters in South Africa. They produce annual reports, civic freedom. So he's going to speak about civic freedom in Asia Pacific region as a part of global monitoring reports. And the third speaker will be the Icha Supriyadi, ADN Secretary General, but he's a victim of coronavirus because ADN office in Bangkok, but he got stuck in Jakarta, So he's out of office, he's locked down, So he cannot go back to office and home in Bangkok. So as a victim of this coronavirus, he will also speak from Jakarta about COVID-19 pandemic and democracy, challenges to democracy. So we have these 3 presentation. Ichal, are you in the screen? I didn't see your face. Okay. Then we have invited the 5 discussants, 3 from the regional, the NGO. The first one, Shamini from Forum Asia. So she'll speak from the human rights perspective. William Gois from Migrants, MFA, and Imarka from IMADA from Sri Lanka. She'll speak from the minority human rights and also a bit about from South Asia. And we have also Sushil Pakurel and Netra from People's Sak, Nepal, from South perspective. And then Kaisha from Argo. Argo is a regional NGO in Kazakhstan, working not only Kazakhstan, but also Central Asia. So we want to have a different perspective, okay? So 15 minutes for presentation, and then we have a short break, and then we'll collect a few questions, and then we will invite the discussants. And then after that, the general discussion and synthesis, okay? So let me show you first. As I said, we have been doing this one for 5 times since the beginning of this pandemic. I want to show you the statistics and trend where we are now, before we discuss the thematic issues. Yeram, can you show the, okay. Here, credit should go to the Yerum, She put all this, you check all the WHO website and they put the numbers and figures. You see, there are 5 regions. First column is Asia Pacific, second Africa, and third one is Latin America and Caribbean, and MENA, that means the Middle East, and the countries, independent states, former Russian, and the Europe and North America. Can you go down a little bit? So as you see, the red means, dark red means more than 5,000, number of deaths. And then between the 1,000 and 5,000, and then less than 1,000. And then can you go down to show different colors? And then we have a brown and yellow and green. The green means it's okay. Things are under control. Red means out of control. Let's go up to see. Very interesting at this time. Usually whenever I see this type of international comparison, charts, infographic, always Africa is a top and Europe is the best, But in this case, completely opposite, very surprisingly, So in terms of number of deaths, Italy is the number one, top, right? Italy and Spain. Oh, no, US should be the top, US should be the top, right? So this is an old audit. So this is a red letter, Russia, because this was made 3 weeks ago, but now we are it is updated today, So according to today's, the US was a top, Europe, right? In number of the deaths, and then followed by Italy, Spain, and France, UK, and Belgium, Germany, and Netherlands. Okay, this is the order, all the European countries, or G7 countries, or OECD countries. And then in Middle East, and Iran was very high, and then followed by Turkey. And now Central Asia, Latin America, this blue means compared to 3 weeks ago, at least 5 times. But red means more than 10 times. That means really rapidly increasing, Okay. So Africa, luckily, because they are so frightened by what's happening in Europe, they introduced very drastic measures, very strong measures to lock down and shut down immediately. That's why Africa still is okay. No country Africa in the red zone. So top one is South Africa, Cameroon, still less than 100, according to WHO. If that state is reliable, okay. Then now the Asia, let's see who is the top, which country is the top. Obviously the China, the number of deaths is more than 4,000. If this state is reliable, still a lot of questions about statistics. And India increased, the more than 5 times compared to 3 weeks. India was, the brown color, but now it's a red, Followed by Indonesia, Philippines, and Japan is increasing, and Pakistan is increasing. Also like India, more than 5 times. And then South Korea is going down. In the beginning of this pandemic, South Korea was number 2 after China, but now it's going down. Then we have a Bangladesh, 163, and then go down. Malaysia, just 100, and Australia, Thailand, and Afghanistan, and New Zealand. But New Zealand, yesterday, they declared the end of pandemic, So that means it's out of now pandemic, officially it's very good. Singapore used to be very good, but now it's increasing, because of, the outbreak in the migrant workers and school. And then the rest, like Sri Lanka, I don't know whether it's a correct statistics. Nimarka, you can confirm. Sri Lanka is less than 10. Taiwan is one of the best countries. And Hong Kong, Myanmar. And very interestingly, there are several countries in green zone. That means no confirmed deaths. Really, we need to congratulate. Though, especially the Vietnam is one of the best countries in terms of controlling this pandemic. And Maldives, Cambodia, Nepal, Mongolia, Timor-Leste, Laos, Fiji, Bhutan, North Korea. I'm not sure. But North Korea, the statistics always questionable. Anyway, this is the official record by WHO. Okay, what does it mean? What does it mean? There are many, many factors. Their government capacity, leadership, governance, and then civic participation, the many things. I don't want to tell now because this is what we are going to discuss. Why, why such a difference between the Asia and other regions, and then difference within Asia, okay? So I'm giving this a basic statistic without interpretation. This is the fact and figures and statistics, okay? So I think this is a really huge challenge to every country, the people in the world. At the same time, it is opportunity for CSO to engage, to change society. How can it make it better instead of after this crisis, instead of going back to what we used to be, but it should be the better than what we used to be. That's what UN Secretary General said, the other days. So with this hope, I want to invite one by one to give the view and perspective so that we can have a discussion from the different perspective. Okay, Sue, are you ready now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Sue. Okay, welcome. Sue, can you introduce briefly and then make your presentation?
Yes, so hello, my name is Sue. I'm the program manager at the Asia Democracy Network. And thank you, Anselmo, for kind of going through the statistics of that, because I think that gives us a chance of seeing how these numbers affect how democracy is viewed, and how the COVID-19 is taken as an opportunity for a lot of non-democratic actors in the region. So just to start off, by all means, this presentation is very one-dimensional. It's really just my brief observation and analysis, and I'm looking forward to discussion, and I'm sure Joseph and Itar will go into depth after I kind of briefly give an overview of what's going on in the region. So I focused on how the COVID-19 affected democracy, and I'm going to start with the conclusion first. It clearly shows that COVID-19 has significantly set back democracy, not only in Asia, but across the globe in what was already in regression. And the pandemic has more so brought on serious questions of the value of democracy. Currently, the COVID-19 crisis response has given authoritarian states the opportunity to delegitimize democracy. And when you see it on the surface, rightfully so, as so we saw in Anselmo's presentation earlier, it's a very easy sell for them. Democracy has been regressed for years, and we are seeing before our eyes how some established democracies are failing to contain the virus. Looking at the reports and the marketing by these authoritarian states, it appears they are handling the COVID-19 situation much better than democratic ones. Of course, we all know, that we should question whether the numbers released by these countries are trustworthy or not. But compared to the chaos in some of the countries, that narrative of semi-totalitarian control of people and information is the only way to rapid response to this pandemic can be very appealing. Not only are they displaying control, but also starting to give back in supplies and support to struggling countries, really taking that role of a donor country now. Especially China has been playing that role and trying to market themselves in that way as well. And the reality is we are seeing many in between states buying into this appeal and questioning democratic governance. With the pandemic, needs for rapid and strong government action, good governance and transparency, and a lack thereof displayed by a lot of these established democracy gives autocrats the opportunity to pursue their own power grab agendas. So we're seeing a lot of, along with that, we're seeing actually democracy being compromised before our eyes. In the Asia region, we're already seeing governments taking advantage of the situation and compromising democracy. We have seen an increase of elections being postponed, such as in India, Pakistan, Maldives, Kyrgyzstan, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Singapore, just to name a few. And more alarmingly, we're seeing governments adopt emergency laws that restrict fundamental freedoms. And, all of these countries, it's very worrisome right now, and it's really bringing a lot of concern to the democracy arena. But I do want to highlight specifically to give an in-depth example is Cambodia. Cambodia on April 10th, the country passed a bill that severely suppressed suppresses fundamental rights and gives access powers to the Hun Sen government. For example, Article 5, it gives unlimited surveillance of telecommunications, control of media and social media, and the power to instill other powers deemed appropriate and necessary. This article also gives the government full authority to restrict freedom of movement and assembly. And more alarmingly is that this bill allows for the use of it to even after COVID. It's very vaguely stated of when this state of emergency law can be lifted, and it's vaguely saying that whenever the people of the nation is facing danger, they could implement this law, which gives, a unlimited opportunity for them to continue to instill this law. It also gives the government the power to declare martial law at any time. And pretty much this is a declaring of dictatorship through legal means. And also, as we are seeing in Malaysia, we're seeing how governments and political turmoil are taking advantage of the pandemic to consolidate their power. So, but then the narrative out there is really kind of at the advantage to authoritarian states, but we all know that, and we have to remember that looking back, if uh, the free flow of information, transparency, press freedom existed in China, then along with their rapid response, the pandemic could have had a chance to be contained in that region. So I think it is our duty really to promote this narrative, and it is possible to control the virus through good governance and through respect for human rights. But I think we need to really ask ourselves, civil society and democracy advocates, if we're really promoting this narrative enough. And just to take a look at some of the good narratives that are out there, I'll introduce you some of the countries that have been doing well in containing the virus. So firstly, Taiwan. Taiwan have been highlighted as one of the model countries that have been able to contain the virus for almost 20 consecutive days. They have not reported any new cases. I think total, this is an approximation, I think the numbers might have changed as of today, but 429 confirmed, 6 deaths for a 23 million population. They did early on declare a travel ban and close their borders, but through their good governance, transparency, access to information, testing, freedom, press freedom, and their very innovative data integration from their national healthcare system, immigration, customs, help them ID the movement of the virus and respond to it very quickly. And it's very respectable that they were able to do this very quickly in a very innovative way, despite being left out of the WHO and being really deprived of that access to information, because they were left out of the international institution. Australia, they also were able to contain this virus very well, good governance, press freedom, etc. They have a total of 6,738 cases, 88 deaths. Public trust played a big role. Leadership has shown the people to really trust, and then the good public, which led to good public adherence to the rules, widespread testing, but they also closed their borders, and a strict social physical distancing measures were taken, and contact tracing was also key. Nextly, New Zealand. Anselmo mentioned that they recently declared that they were COVID-free, and I think New Zealand has been highlighted as a model in many news outlets, and their success of flattening the curve is really, of course, because they have a good governance and they have a very strong leader by the prime minister that showed great leadership, that they were able to grab a hold of this situation very quickly. But New Zealand is kind of in an isolated location. They did do harsh lockdowns, But because of the public trust and great leadership, the public adhere to the rules. They practice social distancing, physical distancing, wide testing, and contact tracing is probably a big reason why they were able to control their numbers. And to be honest, their great leadership in of the government and the good governance that the government displayed played a very big role in really taking control of the numbers and the spread of the virus. And lastly, and I think a lot of news media outlets have been, very promoting South Korea also as a very good model. And I think out of all the other previous countries that I've spoke about, South Korea was one of the only countries that did not put forth a travel ban, nor did they do an emergency lockdown. There was really no emergency lockdown that happened, although there were emergency laws put in place to restrict assembly, to kind of disperse public gatherings of many people. But I think as the foreign minister in one of the BBC interviews, I think highlighted, the biggest factors of how they were able to control and the numbers was because of their governance, their transparency, press freedom, access to information, testing, and contact tracing. And I think mostly because the public trust, because of the access to information, and really brought also that public trust to have people kind of buy to the rules, and then so that the numbers could be controlled. And also South Korea was a very good example of, showed an example of they were able to implement elections successfully even during a pandemic crisis, which could be a very good model for the region or the world. And these are some of the narratives that are great narratives that are out there that we should really be putting forth. And democracies must show that it could govern efficiently and effectively, and especially during a pandemic. The autocrats, the autocrats and authoritarians have been displaying that they have controlled the outbreak. Of course, we may ask at what cost, compromising freedoms, but the confusing and uncertain circumstances of the pandemic could put these regimes in the brighter light as they market that they're successful in managing the virus. But it is vital that democracies show that it can efficiently and effectively govern and control the virus and the economic deterioration in this crisis, and our duty to promote democratic narratives and push back to show that human rights and freedoms are necessary or vital to thrive in a democracy. So, the COVID-19 crisis in many respects have shown the world our limitations. It has showed us very clearly how we have left behind the vulnerable, as they were the most impacted during this crisis. It also showed us how unsustainable our society is, which makes many doubt democracy. But we must be better and improve democratic good governance to show that although it may not be perfect, it is vital to prioritize human rights and democracy. And this crisis cannot be overcome in silos. We must come together in solidarity, share best practices, and work together to improve ourselves to create a sustainable and inclusive society. And then I think Itar will go into, after Joseph, kind of go into with whatever I just laid down there as the foundation, what can we, civil society, do to really push back in 2020 during this pandemic crisis? What kind of advocacy can we do? So I'll stop my presentation there, and I think Joseph could go into the more in-depth analysis. But thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Let's give a big hand to Sue. Thank you for giving us some very insightful background and the context where we are now. It's very interesting. You pick up 4 countries as a good practice. Of course, it's not perfect. Taiwan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. Of course, there are many other countries which control from the beginning, And so I think for your political analysis later on, it will be also interesting to compare, what's the, so-called New Zealand, Australia, we call Western democracy in Asia, and the Western democracy in Europe, why is such a big difference? Because I'm sure there are a lot of analysis about different response to this COVID-19 pandemic in Europe. For instance, Italy, France, the Spain, this is one group, Southern Europe. And then we have Eastern Europe, which is like a Poland, Czech, their performance is much better than this Southern Europe. And with the Nordic, Sweden, Norway, and Germany, all different, why? So I'm sure there are a lot of discussion in this recovery process. Why such a difference? What is the role of democracy? Is it, as Sue mentioned, is it democratic, country or authoritarian? Which one is more effective in controlling? So this is the first part of our discussion. But second part is in the economic recovery. Because pandemic is not only the medical, and this is an economic social impact. So which democracy, what kind of democracy can better address this socio-economic impact, So story is not over yet, ongoing, even expanding, So I think she put a very good, the questions for our further discussion, So which democracy, why such a difference? And then it leads us to the more important question, what can we do, Because civil society, what civil society can do. So now let's move a little bit go deeper now. As you know, the CIVIC has been producing this civic space monitoring for last several years. But now in the context of the pandemic, even, I don't want to give your secret yet, but he will present to us what is really happening in the civic space, the impact of this pandemic. Joseph, you have 15 minutes. They have also very colorful infographic PowerPoint, please.
Yeah. I'll try to share it right now. Hopefully it will work. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, familiar,
okay. Great. Okay.
Great.
So I think following on from what Sue said, I will now slightly paint a bit more of a negative picture of the realities on the ground and on what we want, but what's actually happening. Looking at the restrictions and the attacks on civic freedoms, as Anselmo, you mentioned, we publish a short analysis of civic space restrictions and attacks that have happened in the last month, looking at the point when the pandemic was declared, and the research was done globally, but I'll be sharing some of our findings on Asia, particularly on freedom of expression, assembly and association, and how this has been impacted by the pandemic. But before that, I just want to quickly make note 2 points about human rights and the pandemic and the state of civic space. So very quickly, the reality is that we know that many countries in this region have imposed emergency laws, nationwide lockdowns, and restrictions on movement. Under international human rights law, we know that in the context of public emergencies, such as this public health emergency we're dealing with now, which threatens the life of a nation, some restrictions are justified. For example, the restrictions on freedom of movement and so forth to contain the pandemic. But there are certain criteria that all governments, particularly democratic governments, have to ensure before they impose these restrictions. They must be legal. There must be a legal basis for this, and it must be strictly necessary. It must be limited in duration and respect for human dignity, and we're seeing real challenges with that in many parts of Asia. It must also be subject to review by parliaments and others, and there's a real challenge where parliaments are not sitting at this time to be able to review some of the legislation. It must also be proportionate to achieving a particular objective in what it sets out to do. It must be non-discriminatory, and I think this is very important in the context of the inequalities we see across Asia. And then finally, it must be strictly to the extent required for the emergency. So there must be it must be time bound and limited during the period of the emergency. And also, I want to emphasize here that certain rights cannot be derogated at any point of time, such as the right to life and freedom from torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. So these are rights that cannot be violated no matter what the context is. So I think it's very important for me to set this context as we look at some of the restrictions. Now moving on, the reality is that even before the pandemic, the state of civic freedoms in this region hasn't been great. It's been actually quite dismal, sadly. Based on the research that Civicus has done across this region, we rate countries based on a 5-point scale from open to close. Out of 25 countries, 4 are already rated close, 8 are repressed, and 10 as obstructed. So what we are seeing is that that civic space is facing a lot of restrictions already in the region beforehand, and only countries like South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, where we see both kind of narrowed and open spaces. Our analysis shows that at least 95% of the population in this region are living in very challenging environments for civic space. And I think we need to take that into context as we discuss these restrictions, because I think that this is a kind of ongoing battle to push back on the violations. Now, what are some of the violations that we are seeing in this region? I think one clear restriction that human rights groups have been documenting right from the beginning is the attempt to censor or restrict information on the pandemic. This potentially prevents people from accessing information that can help them protect them and their families from this pandemic, but also to be able to ask informed questions about the decisions being made by the authorities with regards to what's happening around them. And here, right from the beginning, we saw China respond to the outbreak by withholding information from the public, underreporting on cases of infection, and downplaying the severity of the infection. The authorities there had censored numerous articles and social media posts about the pandemic, including those posted by the families of those infected and people living in cordon areas. But we're not seeing only this in kind of close countries. Even in Indonesia, we saw the president there deliberately suppress information about the spread of the coronavirus in the early weeks of the pandemic, purportedly to prevent the public from panicking. And so I think we are seeing this pattern also in different countries. The other worry that we're concerned about is internet shutdowns, because we know that there's been shutdowns of the internet in places like Indian administered Kashmir, as well as in the Rakhine state in Myanmar. And this has been really hampering the ability of doctors to obtain information about the virus and also to educate the public. So kind of restrictions before the virus hit is really affecting the ability of states to deal with it because of the internet shutdowns. The other trend that we are seeing is threats and arrests of people who are criticizing the state's response to the pandemic, or those who are disseminating information around it. For example, we saw in Pakistan where groups of doctors and medical staff who were protesting against the lack of protective equipment in their fight against the pandemic, and they were arrested and detained by the authorities. In Vietnam, where the state controls all conventional media and implements strict social media censorship, the authorities have been cracking down on people using Facebook and bloggers who were trying to disseminate information in the earlier periods of the pandemic. We recorded over 600 people who were called to the police station for interrogation and so forth. But also, even in Thailand, we saw an artist who had raised questions about the lack of screening at the airports being charged under the draconian Computer Crimes Act. As well as in Sri Lanka, where the Inspector General of Police instructed all police officers to take legal action against anyone publishing or criticizing the government on social media. So we are seeing a government use different methods to suppress any kind of criticism or dissemination of information. The third trend we are seeing is the restrictions on the media and journalists, and this is very worrying. As we know, we need a robust media environment is critical during the pandemic. Access to life-saving information is key in this fight. But as governments impose restrictions in attempt to curb the pandemic, journalists hold authorities to account by providing analysis, by engaging in debate, and by creating a space for dialogue. And here again, I point to China very early during the pandemic in February. We saw a journalist going missing. There was a journalist called Li Zehua who had traveled from Wuhan to Wuhan from Beijing to report on the pandemic. and he had published a video about the lack of measures being taken by the local government to deal with the pandemic, and he went missing very quickly after publishing that video. We've also seen journalists being charged in the Philippines for so-called spreading false information, as well as also in Cambodia, there was a journalist who quoted exactly what Prime Minister Hun Sen had said about the economic consequences of COVID-19. He was charged, and also his license, his journalist license was revoked. And then most recently also, in a blatant attempt to use the pandemic to as a cover to intimidate the media, in India, we saw the editor of a leading newspaper, The Wire, who was charged for reporting that the government minister had violated the coronavirus lockdown. So we are seeing governments use multiple methods to kind of silence the media or to silence any criticism undertaken by journalists in different countries. And finally, and also fourthly, we are also seeing the use of restrictive laws to combat misinformation. Look, we understand that the World Health Organization has raised concerns about an infodemic, is what they've called, where there's a flood of false information and misleading information about COVID-19, bogus cures, conspiracy theories, and so forth. But instead of combating by facilitating access to information or debunking misinformation about the virus, what governments have done is resort to anti-fake news laws that they already had legislated before, to criminalize individuals. For example, here in Malaysia, we've had 230 people being investigated for spreading fake news in this country. But also in our neighboring Indonesia, criminal defamation laws have also been used against 50 over people for allegedly spreading fake news. So laws that were being used to silence activists and defenders and critics are also being used in the context of this pandemic to silence any form of criticism, and I think this is a real problem. Other violations that we are seeing is the targeting of human rights defenders. We were seeing patterns of that again in China, where government has arbitrarily arrested activists who have been operating a web page to collect censored COVID-19 articles and social media posts, but we also see that pattern of a concern in a number of other countries, and it is something we need to be aware of. The other concern that we have is the abuses by the police during the lockdown. Civil society and journalists have raised concerns about the use of excessive force, inhumane and degrading treatment by law enforcement officials towards people who have violated the lockdowns. For example, if in the Philippines, police and local officials had arrested people and put them in dog cages and forced them to sit there in the midday sun as a form of punishment. We know in the Philippines that over 100,000 people, according to reports, have been arrested for violating the curfew. Also in India, we have seen numerous videos circulate of police officers violently caning those who do not respect the restrictions. Some have been forced to do push-up, squats, crawling on the floor, rolling on the street. So very degrading methods being used by the police as they deal with the pandemic. Even here in Malaysia, a week ago, we had 2 women who was stopped at the roadblock and was abducted by a police officer who raped them. And now, because of an outcry by civil society, this case has been brought to the court. So we are seeing also where there are already problems with the police, that violations and abuses are happening with impunity in many countries. Another area that we are concerned about is what we are seeing as increasing intrusive surveillance measures to combat the pandemic, which we believe could have longer lasting consequences. We all know about China's notorious technology for surveillance, unconstrained by privacy legislation. Their universal camera system was used in the early months to catch, shame, and fine citizens going out without face masks and for various other reasons. But even other nations like Singapore or even South Korea are using combinations of location data, video camera footage, and credit card information to track people around COVID. So I think it's important that there must be proper oversight over these forms of surveillance. And I think finally, we are also seeing overbroad emergency laws being legislated that grant vague and overly powers that could endanger civic freedoms. Sue has clearly already outlined the problem with the Cambodian laws that has been legislated, which basically empowers Prime Minister Hun Sen to override numerous fundamental human rights protections, including unlimited surveillance of telecommunication, control of the media and social media, and restrictions of freedom of movement and assembly. But also the Philippines, in its emergency response, has also now used it to legislate against false information, when previously there was a lot of pushback before the pandemic. Now they've used the pandemic now to pass these forms of laws. So I think there's a real problem with broad laws and restrictive laws that are being legislated in this region. So, so I've outlined some of the challenges. So what are the things can we do to push back on these realities? I'll just highlight a number. I think there's a great need to safeguard freedom of expression in all its forms while addressing the pandemic, meaning pushing back on censorship of social media as well as conventional media. Government should also ensure strong protections for whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are very critical at this time to be able to share information with the government on how to deal with the pandemic. But many countries, many fear speaking up because of these laws. And I think that's very important that this issue is looked at and there's a pushback on forms of censorship. The second one is, I think we need to call on governments to replace their approaches to misinformation, which deals with criminal sanctions rather than transparency. So I think here that's important that they use the facilitating information and debunking misinformation rather than just use coercive measures to stop misinformation. There's also a need to protect media freedom and to address violations against journalists. I think here we need to work with media NGOs. We need to work with media councils in our different countries and journalist groups. Many of them are at the front line of monitoring the pandemic, and I think we need to figure out ways of working with them. And besides that, there also needs to be some oversight over the police and law enforcement officials to ensure they do not conduct abuses while they are enforcing the lockdown. So if there are oversight policing bodies, if there are national human rights institutions, are they working effectively to oversee these kinds of violations? Besides that, we need to ensure that surveillance measures are lawful, necessary, and proportionate. And I think finally, and most importantly, we need to ensure that any laws or decrees that are deployed now are in accordance with democratic norms and are not used to abuse human rights and are proportionate and temporary. And here, the role of parliaments are very critical and lawmakers to be able to engage in these issues. So I think I've painted for you the broad concerns that we have on civic freedoms and what we as civil society and others need to do to address them and to push back against them. I'll end my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. We have, this is the second presentation. I think it's excellent in terms of describing what's happening on the ground in different countries and what can be done. So there are some recommendations. This is a part of the report. I believe you have received this report by email a few days ago. Okay, now let's move to the third presentation about what can we do. I think we have a very good recommendation from Joseph's presentation, but question is how to make it possible on the ground. How to implement all these recommendations, how can you build a common strategy and so on, So now, Ichal, could you please introduce briefly about ADN, Asia Democracy Network, for those who are not familiar with the ADN, and then you can explain, your ideas of how we can work together to address all those challenges. Ichal, you have a floor.
Hello, thank you, Anselmo. Hello, everyone. I can see many good friend, good mentor, good senior here. It's very happy everyone still in the good health and the good spirits, watching democracy and try to defending democracy online right now. The space is changed. We cannot go out. We can just be online here. And I can see among the attendees, many friends from all corners of different continents. Very much appreciate for your attentions and your concerns. I know some part of the world now must be almost morning. So this is actually blessed, Anselmo, and then for everyone, we are still coming in the same spirit. So for those who are still doesn't know about ADN or Asia Democracy Network, we are like the umbrella of democracy organizations comprised by many regional networks organization from different pillar of advocacy, representing different sectoral advocacy issue like human rights, elections, migrations, developments, and also what else I forgot. But well, we are mainly by 8 pillars of regional organizations with among 300 national member across Asia, and then we're having partner outside Asia. So total will make like we have 500 regional partners. So this is the brief explanation about ADN. Actually, in I think in this slide I have introduction about ADN, but I put it behind because I know as a last speakers I have a blast. Almost all the point has been touched by the first 2 speakers. And of course, this is the deadly hours for me as we are still observing fasting here. And then for the next 2 hours, actually we expecting iftar. Anyway, let me share what's in my notes.
Ichal,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, why don't you share your beautiful PowerPoint? I saw it, I found it very, very useful. Instead of, is there any intellectual property right? Why don't you share, your beautiful PowerPoint?
I'm trying to find the way. Just now I'm learning how to use it.
The screen. You can speak. So while the Sue can put your PowerPoint while listening to you.
All right. Now I can.
Oh, you can manage. Oh, wow, you are very good. You can manage the presentation and speaking at the same time. Wow, you are very advanced. I don't know how.
Well,
okay.
Well, in Indonesia, among the Indonesian stakeholders, since the first time my presidents announced Indonesia is a pandemic for the first case, I think there's a lot of things happening here. But I guess this is my observations as I also joining the national desk, national task force of the volunteer desk. So I was like committing one day every week, my days to joining the volunteers. I'm developing protocols and then providing training for many like 10,000 of volunteers who are committed to join us. I'm communicating with Japan volunteers. I'm communicating with China volunteers. So many communication we have. Then I really got some impressions that's actually what happening in different country around the world actually is coming and having similarities. Let me start with the pandemic impact. Actually, the effects is we don't realize is affect all livelihood aspect. Unfortunately, the poor, informal sectors, minorities, and marginalized group is the most vulnerable. I think we can see a lot of reports in different report of media, reports of news clip, report of different organizations that posing a lot of the vulnerability amongst the poor and then the vulnerables, including the marginalized groups. And then we've been seeing drama, true or not true, fake news or disinformation from different news is depending what news we read. But we also see a few country triumphs, like what the first presenter say that there are 4 countries that can consider successful or triumph to winning these battles. But we also see many still struggle, try to cope with this crisis, while we all know some miscarried, some government is miscarried in the crisis management. I hope my country is not in consider as the one who miscarried. So I think the quick recovery or slow recovery or struggle or miscarriage is really a test of leadership in different countries in the world. This is also evidence how the efficiency of the governments to manage public orders in limit and content spreads, and how actually the quality of medical services in different countries in reducing fatalities. And of course, this is evidence how good our government to providing social safe nets to reduce vulnerabilities. And of course, it's depending on financial strengths. And then to ensure the efforts, and then how the political opportunity for maneuver has been used by opposition or any other governments in terms to strengthening the authoritarianisms, or opportunity for the opposition to weakening the government. So I think we have come across about these three phenomena around this COVID-19 crisis, including the effect to the democracy. And then I moved. Why can I move? And I moved to some kind of the thesis or argumentation that I try to develop. Why democracy is under threat? I think I try to discover many of these answer in many kind of literatures. First, I think we consider the COVID-19 is attacking directly to the democracy routine or to the heart of democracy, where actually freedom of movement, assembly, periodical election, inclusiveness, etc., is under siege right now, especially the freedom of movement and assembly, because people fears to go. People also don't know what to do. They're dealing with unseen or unknowns virus or enemy right now. And then unfortunately, nobody is sure on how long it will be remain this long. Anselmo in the beginning was mentioning I'm the victim. Now it's my 40th day, 40 days in Jakarta, because I cannot get out of the plane and then meet my family. But I'm enjoying and taking opportunity here by joining the volunteers, and then also working from the small space that I have here. The argumentation number two, why democracy is under threat right now, is because vacuum check and balance. The CSO, parliaments, and media, which is normally kept check on government, now seriously weakened and found difficulties to restructure the works. I think we have to admit ourselves as a civil society who have funding structures, we have a reporting structure, we are quite struggle with restructuring, renegotiating with our funders, and then of course, we have to re-strategizing. Suddenly, we cannot move anywhere. We have to stay from home, and then we are really relying on whatever plan or advocacy from online. Lucky, there is still online things like. So, for the time being, or I don't know for how long, the civil society cannot perform in providing critique or check and balance to governments, except they're doing online. Parliaments and media. This is the more important. I think the first two, Joseph was mentioning about media, etc. And then the last argumentation that we are thinking to make why democracy under threat is because in absence of weakened internationalizations, pressure and sanctions seems like doesn't work right now, because country around the world or globally is now dealing the same problems. I don't know who's going to be the police in UNs or in other international system. So this is the effects to human rights democracy. I think Joseph mentioned some, so I'm not talking so much about it. Besides growing authoritarianism, more bad law that we're witnessing, I think the right to justice, food, shelter, jobs, safety, and then another right is under harm right now. And then of course, the most visible thing is exacerbations of discrimination, xenophobia, hate, and exclusions. And then that's from human rights aspect. But from democracy aspects, I think I just borrow Evan Gersmas from Forbes publications analysis. He classified, at least there are democracy restriction on enhanced surveillance powers, suspension of rights, control over information and disinformation, delay election. I think all those argumentation has been mentioned rightly and nicely with the previous speakers. This is just a slide that I just attempted to show. All are vulnerable, but can we imagine the post-war or the torn war country like Yemen, like Syria, or like this? So I think nobody in this forum able to describe how suffering they are. But I like the quote of the Antonio Guterres of the UN Secretary General that everyone without exception has the right to live. Saving intervention and this responsibility lies with the government. The scarcity of resources or the use of public or private insurance schemes should never be justification to discriminate against certain group of patients. Everybody has the right to health. But who can ensure the right to health? I think everybody knows the answers. Only the rich or a good government can provide the access. This is another just like description.
Yeah. Icha, just a minute. If you don't mind, I know you have a lot of substantive, the slide and later part, which about strategy. Since we are already running out of time, can you skip this part and then go to the concluding part in terms of suggestion so that we can have a more...
Okay. Oh, it's gone now. What is that? Hello?
No, it's okay. Yeah. We can hear you. Yeah. Okay.
It's
the suspension of the right to vote. Okay. This part, we can skip, because I know that you have several suggestions for action.
I try to go to the last part, but seems like it's gone round. Okay. Sorry. See, it's navigating me somewhere else.
Oh, it's not moving. The surveillance, hacking, surveillance.
Yeah, I think. Oh, okay. So in conclusion, so this is last two slide that I want to presenting. Last two slide is seems like COVID-19 attack to the center of democracy. Check and balance is in shocking stage. Public in fears. Two, says and deteriorated democracy and human rights situation require big effort to bounce back. This is what we believe is required bigger effort to bounce back. Is bigger than ever. Sue was mentioning at the first presentation. Democracy already been regressed before the COVID-19 and now even greater when the COVID-19 hits around the world. So I think to push back, it's required bigger effort to bounce back. Number three, health. It is a problem of health at the first time and then turn to security and then now becoming political maneuver. And then this morning we discussed, Anselmo, is can go to be human rights problems. And then this is the conclusion, digital tool plays bigger role than ever. Next, this is my recommendations. I think we need to speed up returns of the check and balance forces, mainly to civil society, media, and then parliament or member parliaments. I think there should be some synergy that really stimulate and make quick recovery so they can make efficient strategy to address concerns and then make a noise and reach the people. I think reach the people, we haven't reached the people yet. Even we start reaching each other between the civil society, but we're not reaching the people yet, which is the people's now in fears. I think number two is to push the parliament to make appropriate response. It was saying response. In many countries, especially in my country or another country, they only worried how to establishing emergency law that giving power to the president, to the prime minister, or to government to deal with COVID. In my parliament in Indonesia, they busy try to talking about to passing the omnibus law, and I believe in many countries around the world, many the parliament acting funny rather than helping. To providing regulation to allow governments, to fighting COVID through democratic and then respect human rights, or at least providing or approving budget to fight COVID. And then my third recommendation is to protect ourselves. I think we are really relying on some things that we call online. Zoom is some things that really cautious by many actors right now. But using now, I hope next meeting we consider or we can putting additional security within Zoom that we use. I think it is compulsory right now to burst digital security for everyone's, for you, for me, Anselmo, for everyone's, because we're using the online and we really rely on that. And I think this is another task, more unity and solidarity to helping countries. We haven't heard from Cambodia. We maybe have difficulties to reach Myanmar, or maybe a country which is vulnerable because hit by the COVIDs. And of course, we need to think sustainability. This related by how long actually this crisis will be remains, and how long actually we have to providing response, including how long actually we ourselves will be sustained. I think we obviously in this battle we require bigger resources. At the moment, Asian democracy, through our consolidation program, we try to develop some things, what we call chronicle democracy monitoring and documentation. I think this is some things that almost done, and then I hope by this Friday or by Saturday, we will finalize the concept, and soon by next week, we can starting kick off the works.
So
we likely.
Teacher, what is this chronicle democracy? What does it mean? Chronicle democracy.
So we realize there are few reports already there online by many organizations, news clip. So we wanted to just to put it there, and then the chronicle will contain some things that, I'm sorry, there's a pun. Angkat lagi mungkin boleh. Angkat lagi.
Okay, yeah.
And then so there will be two. We aim to get two pointers like what do you call it? Aggregated data and also stories from the ground.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
And then focusing the disinformation and other factors. And the number two, after we got those kind of data, I think we're going to providing advocacy programs addressing those concerns to the regional and national counterpart in order to make actions. And number three, of course, we're identifying that there are greetings. There is a greetings needs for training on digital and other support for the NGO. At the moment, so many NGOs still cannot revive. They cannot restructuring their things, and then they really need our help. I think this is the great time for us to unite even better than before, Anselmo. So I have to start from there, and then I'm waiting for intervention.
Okay, thank you, Ichal. Thank you very much for your excellent PowerPoint presentation. Oh yeah, this is last one. Is you see these colorful logos who are the members and partners of ADN. This Forum Asia, INFID, ADA, CIPA, AMFREL, GPEC, MFA, and many others. These are family, extended
Can I
family
add something? May I add something?
Oh, yes, please, Sue. Yeah.
Yes. I just wanted to reiterate a little bit on our Democracy Chronicle project. So, there's already, we're seeing, a lot of our partners, a lot of on the national level and the regional level, they're already documenting and, putting out documenting what's going on and how COVID-19 is impacting a lot of these thematic sectors. So we're taking a more journalistic approach to this. We want to document a lot of these voices and stories. And because ADN is a regional network, by all means, we're not saying we're going to be doing all this work. We'll be, we're hoping to partner with all of you and working with our members and partners to really consolidate this information and put it in a one-stop shop so that it's documented, that it's easily accessible, and it really highlights the Asian narrative, Asian voice of what's going on to human rights, democracy, and all of the thematic sectors under the umbrella of democracy.
Okay, thank you for your clarification. Hopefully you can put in the also digital map, the ADN website, so that if you can click country and then we can get all the necessary information later on, in addition to documentation. Okay, now, before we have a 5 break, I want to introduce 3 questions in the Q&A. Ted from Singapore, the question is about judicial execution, some countries, especially Latin America, they are, the releasing the prisoners in prisoners, and that there is a riot in the prison. So many things happen at the same time. Was there any case in Asia, judicial execution during the pandemic? I remember there's one news article. Okay, so question is, what about the moratorium or stop practicing the judicial execution? Of course, in Philippines, there's extrajudicial killing, which is out of judicial, but judicial execution, so this is one issue, the rule of law. And the second question is, it's about technical one, the Sri Lanka policy information. Maybe we can make a correct later on, but this is a more factual one. And then third question is also very important. HR's conclusion point 4, digital tools. It seems like that digital tools will be used to continue population surveillance. And then whether UN, especially UN human rights bodies, can do something about this digital surveillance. I don't know exactly, we have more than 40 special procedures whose mandate, it can be freedom of expression. Also, there was also a resolution on new technology and human rights, So anybody can answer this question. So before we, there are very useful, the analysis of the situation and also some suggestions. I want to, we have 5 discussions, and maybe you can pick up some of the issues in their presentation, but I want to put 1 or 2 common questions, okay, to all the discussions. And after the intervention by discussion, of course, 3 presenters, you have time to answer and also making concrete remarks. Number 1 is, especially as I said, this is a challenge, obviously, but at the same time, this is opportunity, What kind of opportunity we can find in this crisis, How we can seize this opportunity to strengthen the civil society engagement, to strengthen democracy. This is one. So I want to ask about to pick up 1 concrete. Okay, this is an opportunity, and then how we can use these opportunities. Number 1, and the other one is, now we are going through this crisis. Do you think after this crisis, someday it will be over, do you think we have a better democracy, or our democracy will be worse than before? After this one. So this is a big question. Because some country. And many of you said, we already have a lot of challenges, shrinking civic space. So now things even worse than before, very pessimistic picture, But as a civil society, we need to make every opportunity, creating this crisis, to strengthen, civic voice and improve, So my question is, but you have to be realistic, what is your scenario, your country or certain sector, for instance, migration, or the South Asia, Central Asia, what will be your scenario? What is your picture, prediction? And then how can you make all the opportunities to improve ourselves situation? Okay, so with this, keep that in mind, and then let's have a 5 minutes break, and then we come back, and then we will invite 1 by 1 all the 5 discussions. Okay, the 5 minutes adjourned. See you soon. Don't go away. The CNN advertisement. Don't go away. More interesting stuff soon, coming soon. Okay. Let's take a water, Also free chatting, Okay, are you back? Shall we begin? Before we begin, I want to share with you the good news. Many of you signed a joint open letter to President Moon Jae-in. You remember last week? Including many international NGO. Now, I just have a telephone conversation with KOICA, our friend, Mr. Song, and the Korean government is really committed to this pandemic and supporting, the vulnerable countries, and especially through CSO, through CSO. So now KOICA is working out modalities so that all your suggestions, ideas, we can implement together with some funding. And the many donor agencies also, they are working in different ways, to support our advocacy, not only the humanitarian relief, but also advocacy work, because the impact of COVID-19 is not only the medical right to health, it's a whole democracy, human rights, So let's discuss more our strategies so that we can invite KOICA and also other donor agencies to support our campaign. I see some now, before, I see 2 hands up from the speakers. Let me see who wants to speak, who raise up hands. I see the 2 names, Shin Hyung-sik, the first Secretary of ADN, so now Senior Advisor to ADN, and also Isha from Sri Lanka. May I invite Dr. Shin to make a short intervention? Sorry, we cannot see your face, but you can speak. We will listen to your voice. Dr. Shin, can you speak? Hello? Hello? Yeah, I see your face, the photo. You look too young. It was a before pandemic, right? This photo was a before pandemic. Okay, please go ahead. Hello, Dr. Shin. Oh, there's some technical problem. Then Isha. And then, sorry, it's a technical problem. Okay, let's go to the discussion. First, Shamini from Forum Asia, Executive Director. Shamini, can I see your face in the screen? Shamini?
Yes, I'm.
Okay, go. Okay, now you are in Bangkok. How long you have been working for Forum Asia? You are new Executive Director. Welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you, Anselmo. I've been here for 2 months now.
Only 2 months?
Only 2 months. And most of that has been in isolation.
My God, 2 months, but on the lockdown.
It's a bang up way to start a new job.
Oh, it's a tough time, Okay, good, welcome. So please share your thoughts and ideas about how we can work together to respond to this pandemic, take into account 3 presentations. Yes, you have a floor, 3 to 4 minutes. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. A lot of what I had intended to say was actually already covered very nicely by the other speakers. So I'd just like to highlight maybe two, maybe three just key points building onto what the other speakers have said. One of the things or the trends that we have also seen in the pandemic is the othering of marginalized communities. Specifically, we have seen how governments, especially the more repressive ones, have played up or allowed narratives and negative narratives of vulnerable populations, including, for example, the negative narrative of the Rohingyas in Malaysia and Asian Australians in Australia to be played up. And talking about how, especially with the Rohingya situation, where governments are not responsible for them, even though they have fled into neighboring countries, and should instead focus efforts to combat the pandemic among citizens. But this, as we know, the pandemic does not racially discriminate, and not tackling the spread of the pandemic among vulnerable populations is actually detrimental to the overall fight. Secondly, the bit, this is something that Joe had mentioned, the role of media and journalism. I just wanted to share some statistics with you that Forum Asia has compiled from March to yesterday. We've noted a total of 71 recorded cases of human rights violations against human rights defenders, and media workers constitute half of these cases. And they are the top ranked group who are victims of state repression, for example, the arrests or investigations against journalists and other media workers for reporting, as we've heard already said. And we've seen police intimidation as well as continued political attacks against journalists. That's a very brief point, but and the third and final point, just to focus on, is the role of national human rights institutions. We, there's and taking into account the two questions you asked at the beginning of this also, Anselmo, we know that right now, how we react to human rights abuses and human rights violations that's coming out of this pandemic, and how states are dealing with this pandemic, it will determine the future of how, whether human rights, the situation of human rights is going to improve or not. I unfortunately don't have a very positive thought about this. I think that repressive states are going to continue being repressive once the pandemic is over, because the more authoritarian states, of the more repressive states, which have codified in law the ability to repress human rights, will continue to do so because it serves political purposes. That's why the efforts of civil society right now, the different groups who are monitoring human rights violations and human rights abuses in this pandemic, is really, really important. In addition to that, as I mentioned, the role of NHRIs. NHRIs and national human rights institutions are really poised in a position to be able to do state level, country level monitoring of issues. And we need NHRIs to come up and speak strongly about the issues of human rights abuses and violations that's happening within the country which they sit in. And one of the ways to do this would be to encourage, webinars and participatory platforms like this, where we can actually really continue to focus on this, not just in terms of discussing the issues, but also in terms of the recommendation, but by and from NHRIs. One way to do this could be by NHRIs could carry out preliminary analyses of how the pandemic is infringing or impacting human rights within countries, and bring attention to specific vulnerable populations, or even gender-specific risks. How is the pandemic affecting or contributing to the rise of gender-based violence, the othering that I talked about, risk to people, especially people in detentions, detainees, also on indigenous populations. So I think human rights institutions are in a position to do that, if I may suggest. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I know that you have been organizing webinar on the various topics of the human rights. I'm also attending regularly, And is there any webinar about role of NHRI on this pandemic? Have you organized any, or you are planning to do?
No, not at the moment, but we are looking at, we are currently in discussion of, we have the ADI program, which is the NHRI program, and we are right now ideating a particular project, but the details are being ironed out, but we are looking at the area.
Okay, very good. So, after this meeting, we will share also with you the program of webinar, the formation, which is excellent, on various topics. Recent one was the children, right? Children, youth, and health. So you can also attend such a webinar, Okay, thank you for your presentation. Marginalized community, human rights defender, particularly journalists, and NHRI. 3 key points. Okay, so let's move to the next one. William, are you with us, William?
Yes, Anselmo.
Okay, welcome, Willie. Are you in Manila? You still locked down in Manila?
I am in Manila, yeah. And it's
You look
good
like
to
a
be.
Buddhist monk now, you know? Okay.
Yeah. Coronavirus
Okay.
look.
Okay.
No, thanks for this opportunity and to be part of this. And I would like to first thank the speakers that went before me. I think the issues that they have raised are very, very pertinent to the discussion that we need to continue to have in this region. Just from our perspective of working on issues of migrant workers, you know, one of the realizations that we have had in this last 2.5 months is that the virus doesn't discriminate, but people and states do. And this has been very clear in what previous speaker Shalini just said about the othering. And this has been very evident in migrant workers, how migrant workers have been seen as the other. And but it is also interesting in looking at how this kind of exclusion and social stratification that we have in our societies, in terms of work, in terms of populations and things like that, how a lot of this has also had an equalizing role in some ways. Let me give you an example. For a long time, migrant workers, particularly Asian migrant workers, have been taking up what are called the 3D jobs. You know, so you saw talk of the dirty, dangerous, demeaning jobs kind of thing. But today, these very jobs are being called essential jobs, essential workers. You know, it's almost a change, and our societies are functioning because of these workers. The security guards, the delivery boys, the seasonal agricultural workers, the nurses, the aides, and things like caregivers, domestic workers. All these are seen today as essential workers. Suddenly, there's a new realization in our society about this. So, is this a reason for hope? As MFA, we are calling for a new social contract with this realization. That, you know, that maybe there should be a new social contract for workers in the essential sector, which before we did not have, because largely workers in the informal sector did not fall into trade unions and they didn't have that collective voice and things like that. Today, can we look at a new social contract for them? I think other dimensions of the COVID that has been useful for us as civil society organizations is a sense of solidarity. I think there is a realization of that we have moved away from doing philanthropy or even charity to a real sense of solidarity. And I think this is also because of the sense of non-discrimination that the virus has kind of imposed upon us in many ways. Can we come out stronger from this? There are, and I'll try to go on a hopeful note here, there are some indicators where we can come out stronger on this. For example, in the area of public health. We all know, and this we have seen in the area of migrant workers particularly, just to give one corridor example of in the Gulf, in the early 70s, 80s, even up to the early 80s, migrant workers in the Gulf had free access to health services. Because at that time there were public health, the facilities in the Gulf countries were very good. They still are very good, but the privatization of the health sector had not come about in a big way. Now it is in a big way, and migrant workers had to buy insurance and things like that. But the pandemic has raised this question again, which was part of the SDG discourse as well, of universal health. And Ichal pointed out to what the Secretary General had said, that health is a right. Health is a right. Can we look at other things? Now in Singapore, for example, Singapore was a classic example. Everything was good. It was a high on the good example about how to tackle the virus. Following South Korea's example, they did not bring lockdown and things like that. But just when they were prepared to say we have settled it, suddenly there was a cluster, a breakout in a dormitory of migrant workers, and 25,000 workers overnight had to be put under quarantine. Within days, within 4 or 5 days, 70 to 75% of the infections in Singapore were quarantined people in Singapore. Infections in Singapore were migrant workers, and 70% of the population of that quarantined population was migrant workers. Suddenly, we realized housing, because for migrant workers, the most smallest, cheapest accommodation is okay because they are migrant workers, they are transient. And now we realize that in a pandemic, you can't create a slum-like situation for migrant workers. So there are things in this kind of, I think the pandemic has shown us that we can, as civil society, can look at and say there are lessons to be learned in this. Even the fact of internet, the access to internet and the right to communication. Again, an example, migrant workers who are away from their families, this fear of how this pandemic is attacking our families, our members and things like that. Right to communication became so important. Migrant workers, they don't have the resources to be in that kind of constant communication. Just to give you one example, in Singapore, when the shutdown happened in the dormitories, one of our organizations just did fundraising to collect the top-up cards for migrant workers who had internet but did not have enough money to top up the top-up card, and they asked for 20,000 Singaporean dollars. That was their target to reach. Within 24 hours, they collected 151,000 Singaporean dollars. Within 24 hours, because people understood the right to communication, especially for vulnerable populations, especially in a situation like this. So I think there are lessons from human rights in democracy that we can learn here about equality, non-discrimination, and things like that. But we have to look at our own actions. And this is where I think it will be important for us to reflect on as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your very interesting intervention. I learned something, from 3D to essential. Because when Kabun introduced the word essential, we are all wondering what is the criteria for essential or not essential. That's a very interesting point. Second is a big lesson from the Singapore, this really, unless we build a inclusive democracy, we cannot combat this pandemic. This is very clear, right? Inclusive democracy means including non-citizens, especially the migrant workers, So I think, thank you for pointing out these two important lessons. Let's move to Sri Lanka, Nimarka. Sri Lanka, the few years ago gave us a really good, great news, victory, return to democracy. But recently, again, we are very concerned about, democracy in Sri Lanka and also transitional justice, many other things. Okay, Nimarka, from your beautiful island point of view, how do you see this pandemic, Okay, please share your thoughts.
Thank you very much. And I think first, it's very nice to see friends and also hear the points that you shared. Firstly, I must say that what we are discussing today, especially taking into context the present Sri Lankan situation, we are making these comments because we love our country, we love our people. Within a discourse where a criticism would be looked at as unpatriotic, patriotism and being unpatriotic. I have to be very careful sometimes in what I have to share with you. But at the same time, we have to share our own lived experience in this COVID situation. So therefore, I start by saying I'm making these comments not in order to attack anybody, not in order to defame anybody, but we have to, as human rights defenders, share openly and share openly in an attempt to enhance our struggles for justice and in order to share experiences that is very necessary in a post-COVID future for the whole world. The pandemic has touched not only Sri Lanka, but it is global. The struggle against the pandemic is not a lone ranger battle. It's a worldwide battle. So I hope this discussion will contribute to looking at best practices and also look at the bad practices. Now, having said that, Anselmo, the present statistics of Sri Lanka is 649 with 7 unfortunate deaths. What I we are talking about democracy. You know, there's many things I have to say, but the time is very short. The immediate impression that got created within Sri Lanka was that we are fighting an enemy. We are a post-conflict nation. So the pandemic was seen, approach to pandemic. I think this happened in China and this happens all over. It's like there's an enemy outside, so we need to fight. Seclusion, isolation, combating were all words that this region has been using in order to look at dissent, in order to look at minority rights, in order to look at people's rights. So therefore, very unfortunately, I think we've got enmeshed in this COVID, combating COVID within a larger militarized language. So I think that is one thing that I have been struggling to, even for me to refrain from using certain terminology like that. We are fighting COVID, as if we are fighting our enemies. So that militarized language has had very grave impact on democracy. And the future, you asked question about the future, and I think that is in my mind. How can we use different words? This is a health issue. This is an issue of access to health. This speak about the manner in which the world has not invested much on virology, epidemiology. So I think these are some of the issues that for me will remain in our minds. The second issue is when it happened in Sri Lanka, the parliament, we were coming into a parliamentary election, and now we have no parliament.
Oh.
Yeah, we have no parliament. The parliament is dissolved. So all the decisions are taken by interim cabinet and by the executive. So we have a democracy deficit. So there is a debate. If you convene the old parliament, I mean the dissolved parliament, some people in the government ranks are asking, will the parliament give a solution to solving COVID? Now the issue is not finding a solution for COVID, but the issue is legitimacy of the government, accountability of the funds, and the transparency that is necessary in order to utilize the public funds that will be made available through various donors. You know, Japan, European Union, Korea, they will be giving us money. So we don't want the same kind of misuse of funds to happen that we saw happening in a post-tsunami context.
Exactly.
We need to invest money in health. So the whole issue of democracy for Sri Lanka presently is also not the issue of just having elections, but having the institution, however bad it may be, the parliamentary democracy, broadband. And I hear just now I got a message to say the Prime Minister is going to convene a special discussion with all the members of parliament in his official residence, not in parliament, next week. So one of the gravest challenges we are having is that. The second issue is all what Joseph raised.
Can you make it short? You know, Nimaka, can you make it short? Because we have 2-3 more speakers here.
The other issue is profiling. Profiling of communities and burial rights, and the interplay of religious extremism, and very in the media profiling certain religious groups, because there is a community clusters that are getting affected. So therefore we have had to deal with the whole issue of sort of, you know, the media use some media not adhering to respecting the other profiling, and in terms of the social media, the Human Rights Commission has issued. I'm very glad that you raised the issue of NHRI, and because there is a letter that the Human Rights Commission has addressed to the IGP with regard to hate and with regard to the circulars they have issued in relation to social media and critiquing the authorities in relation to lapses. So these are some of the struggles we have. And I think I agree with all the points raised by Joseph, Sue, and Ichal with regard to the impact on NGO, impact on freedom of expression, and impact of assembly. There are a lot of unanswered questions than solutions. So, and I think we are left with that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nimarka. I think you raised a very important issue. Some country, so-called military governance, military rhetoric, narrative, and the policy, especially in the Thailand, because they believe military way, very authoritarian way is effective, the strategy to come back, So this is the important point. And then parliament, this is really serious, in the name of pandemic, and then they dissolve the parliament. So there's a legislation, profiling, religious extremism, all kinds of problems. Okay, so this is from the Sri Lanka. So now let's move to the mountain, from island to mountain. Sushil, are you with us? Nepal is one of the best countries in terms of the record. There is no confirmed death. There are some, confirmed cases, but no death. So, but at the cost of the total lockdown, in Nepal, And since Sushil, you are the former commissioner, National Human Rights Commission, also you're advisor to National President, Human Rights. Please give us some.
I'm not
okay,
nowadays.
Yeah. Oh, okay, you was okay, good. So now that means you have more freedom to speak, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So, Shay, you just. How are you, by the way? Are you okay?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Okay?
I'm very fine. Enjoying the family life now. After decades of being an activist. So I'm enjoying my family life. I mean, it's a fantastic, but it is sometimes very boring also, sitting always in the room. Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to discuss, and it is good to see all the friends from many places. I'm sorry that I was a bit late because of the technical problem. You mentioned, and Nimalka just mentioned, I think we have all the South Asian countries have some similarities, but Nepal is a bit different in that context. We are the second luckiest, I would say, because after Bhutan, we have now, of course it is, we don't know what will happen tomorrow, but there is no fatality and only 57, but it is slowly increasing, 1 or 2 adding, but we are sending back to the persons after their treatment. So there are around 40 plus people are in hospital. But there is a challenge. You mentioned about the challenge also. We don't have, luckily the government have not enacted any special law or ordinance or anything. So we have, in that sense, we are normally functioning, and there are some, constitutional provisions which compel the government to call the parliament, because there is already mentioned in the constitution that on the May 28th, there must be the budget for next session, year. So government is preparing to call the parliament, and yesterday Prime Minister visited the parliament building, and they are adjusting all the sitting, style. Of course, we are not, I know the civil society, as a member of civil society, I would say we are not very much comfortable with using this, word social distancing. Rather, we need this, social help, solidarity now, this context. So it's a physical distancing, I think. We are picking up this, other, people who are using that, and we are very much overwhelmed at that word. But it is, of course, physical distancing. The problem we are having is that, we are already locked in for 5 weeks. And this is the time for the agriculture work. And the agriculture people, if we are not focusing ourselves on the agriculture activities, we'll be having a lot of problem next year, maybe food crisis. And you see the situation in India, from where we were very much depending on importing food if we don't have. And also, I don't know when they are going to open the border. And we have also, like open border with India. And India, there are two problems we are facing because of the border. Is that one is the rhetoric going on in India about the Muslim, anti-Muslim rhetoric, which is also going, impacting little way, but the civil society is very much showing their concern on this, and we are reacting, we are working on that. The main challenge is our migrant workers. We don't have capacity to bring them all back to Nepal, and we need to put them in the quarantine. We don't have that capacity, as you know. Millions of our migrant workers are willing to come, and from India, many are coming back. Of course, this has brought some opportunity also. The first opportunity is improve the health system. We were very much talking about this privatizing the health because government was not very much interested to put resources on the health before, but now they realize, and everybody realized that. And what do you mean by the big hospitals? When we see that what is happening in US and Singapore and other developed countries where we have already the big hospitals. So we need this, the right to health, how you implement the right to health. So there has been a lot of discussion is going on this, focusing on health right. And also the second is the education. A lot of, our students were going abroad. Now they want to come back. So suddenly Nepal will be overwhelmed by the, young youths and the people with working capabilities, the migrant workers. So now the challenge is how to involve them, because they were mostly, they will be returning, of course, from the Gulf state, from other, developed countries anyway. So, they will not willing to go back in the same time. So we need to involve them. And where the civil society, what I found is that the dilemma among the NGOs and the human rights defender, because they had their own way of working style. But in a situation where we are talking about, distancing, when we are talking about the isolating yourself, and they were monitoring mostly the civil and political rights, that is now the economic, social, cultural rights, how you monitor it. These are the problems we are facing. And also the role of national institution. What I see is that, the national institution is also becoming a bit, like inactive in this, because in our border, thousands of migrant workers from India side and thousands of migrant workers from Nepal side, there are a lot of workers from India also in Nepal. So all are, locked there. But the Human Rights Commission is not paying anything, like they are also, this is also the how you work, how you react in the new context. There also you can help. Like, the national institution
can you make a short please?
International solidarity, how we can enhance the international solidarity in this, especially among the human rights defenders. This is not that you go after the post-COVID.
Sushil, we have one more speaker, can you wind up your...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like we have to change. We are talking about post-COVID in many ways, but how we are going to react the post-COVID. I think we need to discuss also that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sushil. I think let me correct, the word social distancing, as you may know, this was academic jargon, academic terminology. Even WHO, they don't use it anymore, physical distancing. We need a social solidarity, not distancing. Physical distancing. Thank you for pointing out. So let's use, not to use a social distancing, this is misleading,
That is what we are doing here.
Physical distancing, but we are more social solidarity, through the cyberspace. And then possibility of famine, and then religious intolerance, and also returning migrants. This is the unprecedented challenge. We never see this type of returning. Instead of exodus, is coming back. So how to accommodate them in those sense. And also role of national institutions. You said they are not very effective. Hopefully, Forum Asia, ANI, Asia Angel Network or National Institution can come up with some good monitoring report and also make NI work more effectively on this challenge. Let's move to the Kaisha Central Asia. Many South Asians, we are not familiar with the Central Asia situation. And that's why for some Forum Asia, some regional NGO, last few years, we are trying to reach out to our partners in Central Asia. The ADA also has one member, Argo from Kazakhstan. Kaisha, are you with us now?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Could you give us how do you see what's happening from the Central Asia point of view, including also Kazakhstan? Please introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share our Central Asia situation on this meeting. And I will just give you some more. Don't like to repeat everything what happened because it's same situation like all Asia Pacific region. But under our overview of COVID and state democracy in Central Asia, out of 5 countries in Central Asia, only 3, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, have acknowledged cases on COVID and have taken important steps to limit the spread and protect citizens. State of emergency has been introduced in these countries, and most of WHO recommendations have been implemented. But most close countries like Turkmenistan and a very poor country in Central Asia, Tajikistan, maintain but they have not identified single case of COVID in their countries. They are concerned about civil society and general public of Tajikistan, but government might heed this true due to the economic situation. Because as we understand, for Kazakhstan, we are oil country, yes, but we also have huge problem with budget. But for Tajikistan, it's really very, very difficult. So in Turkmenistan, it always was a close country, and situation is not clear for us. But our colleagues from Turkmenistan participate in our Central Asia meeting on COVID in our webinar yesterday, and they share information what happened in country. So now we understand that, and we learn, but in Tajikistan, lot of respiratory illness growing, and government sees this as a case of pneumonia. But for Tajikistan does not have history on intensive pneumonia outbreak. So it means what citizens don't trust government. It's a not clear information. And now Tajikistan expects independent WHO experts to evaluate situation in Kazakhstan, and they, I think, also waiting some more international support, humanitarian support for testing some of, some citizens in Tajikistan. So impact of COVID in civic space and freedom and challenges is same like access to information, what limited access, only state-owned media does reporting about situation, and criminal sanction for introducing, spreading false information, or administrative fines. For example, in Kazakhstan, more 5,000 people has been charged for administrative offense for violation quarantine, and more than 1,000, there were 1,062 of them had been sentenced to time in custody. The legitimacy of this arrest is not always clear. So it is a real situation because our country is a lockdown, and we have quarantine strong, and with the quarantine zone, everything, it's a people can't move, and access to justice also give a lot of barrier. Transparency and accountability, same situation. In our Central Asia countries, created a lot of some different foundations, like crowdfunding platform, international donors, citizens, business can just, complete some money, but question, transparency mechanism to track targeted use this fund when introduced to general public is not clear. And especially in Kyrgyzstan, they share this experience, and they have statement to Prime Minister to open and clear publication of how they track this all budget line to fight with pandemic. And of course, as now we said, quality of system, online education, internet system, quality and communication, IT technology, it was not well. And it's idea for Kazakhstan and Ministry of Education to create like online distance learning for all school. It was really cracked down. And now they find a different alternative way like TV program for school, They have some schedule, they try to do that, but it's not work like real online education. It means what quality of education they will really need to focus. It's in Kazakhstan. In Tajikistan, getting really, it's very expensive. It's not possible to do that. So, and vulnerable population, of course, same situation, And for example, in Kyrgyzstan, they announced what gender-based violence has increased during the pandemic. There is a 60% increase in comparison with the last year, So economic challenges, of course, massive job income losses, disproportional affecting self-employers or people who informal employers. But in Kazakhstan, for example, they receive government support, like 42,000 tenge each of these can apply electronically and receive this money. But I don't know it's possible or not for Kyrgyzstan or to Tajikistan. It's really huge money. So, and now we see for future our strategy, because it's a challenges we face in Central Asia, what we can do that. Of course, we need to increase some, role of national human rights institutes, need to start talk with this and work about that. And also we need to monitor and advocate new legislation, because, for example, in Kazakhstan, law of freedom of peaceful assembly, they have new, they try to apply to Senate now, new law, but it's really a huge restriction for freedom of media, and of course the freedom seat. And also we think for future, we need to think how will come CSO monitor and lesson learn and monitor government response way out from pandemic. For Kazakhstan, for example, what we do after pandemic, how we can control, spreading virus, if we will get step by step to open and, open our cities and, and these things. And also the risk of outbreak of COVID should be also minimized. And of course, we think about preventive measure, and we need to learn and understand how we can do better public awareness and engage citizens to participate in the elimination of COVID in our country. Yep. So it's our idea. So for future, we see this strategy.
Okay.
So, and of course, we decided to monthly meeting, webinar, and work with the Central Asia colleagues together on this whole strategy and join to the Asia Pacific strategy.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for very good general description of the situation in Central Asia, especially the many in the South Asia. We are not familiar with your situation, so thank you for enlightening us. And especially role of monitoring, because it's not for the sake of monitoring, but we need to monitor systematically so that it's a part of preparation for the after Corona, after lockdown, after shutdown, how to build, the society again,
Yes.
So thank you for raising that issue. So now we have received 5 comments from the sub-regional perspective, also thematic perspective. So now I want to invite 3 speakers. What are your takeaways? There are several questions. You can address some of the questions. And then since we don't have much time left, maybe your response plus concluding remark as 3 speakers. So who wants to speak first? Joseph, Ichar, or Sue?
I can go first.
Yes, okay, Joseph. Yeah.
So yeah, so I very quickly, for me, I think there are 4 areas which I sort of drawn from the discussions. I think what you said, Anselmo, we really need to figure out how we monitor the situation in the different countries. Some of us may not have access to certain communities, certain areas in the next few months. How do we develop those systems and those processes to be able to collect information and analyze them and be able to respond? Secondly, we need to look at the issue of awareness, because many groups, particularly vulnerable groups, don't know what to do vis-a-vis the police, what to do on issues around surveillance and privacy. And we really need to think about how we can create different forms of information flow to these various communities in the areas that we are. I think the third area is the whole area of advocacy and pushing back. I think some people have raised this issue about some of the laws that have been legislated and policies. How do we push back on them after the lockdown ends and so forth, but also thinking about how we reorganize issues around employment, around healthcare, around housing. There are many issues that we need to rethink and have those discussions on. And finally, I would say accountability. How do we ensure that the abuses that happened in the last 1-2 months, that there are people held accountable, because we cannot just sweep them under the carpet. There must be some official review of the government's response and where things went wrong, and hold people accountable for that. So those are the 4 areas I would say are important moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. Let's move to Sue.
I think my concluding remarks would be, this was just so fascinating, and even just looking at the comments, the Q&A, the question and answers, and the actual conversations that are happening in the chat, it really shows that there's just so many different areas that we have even touched upon, and that needs to be discussed, and to continuing to preserve and defend democracy. And I think this is a very good start for us. And I think for me personally, this really reaffirms ADN's role in the region to really kind of bring all of these different perspectives and discussions and issues together, so that we could really do this all together. Because we've been saying this for a long time. It's working in silos is definitely not going to help us, but we really need to come together. And I think this COVID-19 situation really gave us that opportunity and really pushed us into the fire. And now at this point, we really need to come together and work together to make things a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. I think you mentioned about silo, because of impact of pandemic is more than health, from public health to human rights, democracy, even peace. This brings us together. We are obliged to work together to respond to these challenges. So I think in this sense, ADN is a right platform. Because ADN, in the name of democracy, we are composed of the migration, human rights, peace, and election and development. So hope we can respond more effectively, through this webinar and the. Okay, Ichal, your Secretary General, you have been on the lockdown for 40 days, and the Ramadan, Ramadan now. So please give us your concluding remark and answer some of the questions.
So I think I echo Joseph and Sue's statements. I think it's very important for civil society to start demand of transparency and accountability to the governments. I think it's time for us now to wake up, stand up, and then try to address the things. Because I believe in the good governance, there are always, similarity of the confusions. They don't have guidelines. How police dealing with the people who come out or the break the isolations, how the inmates or the prisoners should be released. I think there's a lot of the area of the manipulations. I heard a few days ago, India prison release is based on who can pay money. It's same also in other countries. So I think this is the part of the civil society to take part and then try to come out. And then another thing is mapping. I guess it's very important to mapping who really in the position that can providing supports, who are the persons or the organization who really need a support. I guess from your position sitting right now, Anselmo, I think the world will be more beautiful than where I'm sitting right now in Jakarta. I don't know from the Joseph sitting in Kuala Lumpur how the world will look like, or Kaisa in Uzbekistan. It's depending how the situation apply and how your freedom has been tried to exercise day by day. I believe if you get locked 40 days or more than that, and in my case, I'm still good. I can cook myself, and then I can still connecting with people. But what William said today, migrant worker without access, without foods, and then migrant worker working from Delhi out of towns, walking around 200 kilometers, things will be different. I think this is, again, I'm reiterate all the spirits on the statement by Joseph, by Sue. This is the needs of all of us, a greater effort that we have to be united together, Anselmo, using your freedom, using your liberty, your advantage to support those who are under, who are not, who are in vulnerability.
Yes,
thank you.
By the way, Ichal, what is your background, the picture? Are you in the San Francisco or in Jakarta? Behind
I
you.
tell you, all Indonesian is good now doing it this.
Yeah, behind, what is the behind? You know, this is what, San Francisco? Is a Golden Bridge?
This is San Francisco, I guess.
Oh, sunrise. Wow, beautiful. Let's learn something, you know, at least to change the background, you know, the landscape. Okay, thank you for intervention. Let's, I don't want to make a synthesis of all our discussion, but a couple of announcements. Number one, as some of you already attending, every Tuesday we have a training program, on-the-job training on this COVID-19 pandemic from the SDG and human rights perspective. So this one, if you are still interested, you just let us know, you know, every Tuesday, I think 2 to 4 Bangkok time. So we have a country case study, learning how to monitor this pandemic from SDG and human rights perspective, particularly SDG 16, you know? Okay, number one. Number two, as ADN mentioned, I think digital advocacy becoming more and more important, you know? So I had a meeting with the HR this morning, whether ADN can organize more digital advocacy training, including how to address the surveillance one and how to be more effective using SNS, many other things, you know, okay, digital. Please share your idea and action plan so that we can also learn from this training program. Number three, many regional organizations are organizing the webinar, you know, Forum Asia here, this is one of them. Let's collect this information. So we will share with you, updated the list of webinars, including the UN, you know, there are many, you know, so you can pick up. It's a really free and learning opportunity while you are locked down, you know. It's a capacity building, okay? So we'll share with you update. So if you have also information about the interesting webinar, please share with us. We'll put together in the Google Doc, you know, okay? The last one, and we will continue this Thursday. Anyway, Thursday every week we have this type of seminar. So we'll let you know about the next topic. It can be one of the issues we discuss, you know. I also learned a lot from your intervention. What are the key emerging issues we need to address more in-depth, you know, the response to some of challenges. So we will keep you updated about our next week plan and the following one. If you have any suggestion in terms of topic to address, just let us know, you know. Okay, we will continue every Thursday. And then remember these many other interesting webinars for your capacity building. No, so last concluding remark, what will happen after pandemic depends on what we do now, you know, during the process. Eventually, I believe someday there will be a less or normal the virus, but there will be a, you know, in terms of democracy, it's a better, stronger, or the weaker, you know, all depends on what we do during this process, you know. So for instance, now as Kaisha said, you know, some country outcome is very good, you know, there no more confirmed deaths, there's the much less, you know, confirmed cases. But question is how, you know, what will happen depends how we do now, you know. In that sense, I think we need to prove, you know, we need to prove that democracy, you know, inclusive democracy can do much better job, you know. Otherwise, we may be able to overcome this crisis, but it's a more authoritarian government after that. We have to pay high price. I think this is a common lesson we can draw, you know, from, you know. So let's look at the record result in terms of number, but we have to see the quality, you know. In this sense, all the recommendations from Joseph and then Ichal and Sue, this can be our guide, you know. So I hope from next week, let's discuss concrete campaign strategies, you know. What can we do, you know, more concretely to change the situation, you know, in this process, okay? So thank you very much for your interventions. Please keep safe. I hope to some of you again next week. And then until we meet in health, good health, face-to-face, you know, because we are supposed to have the Kathmandu Democracy Forum in March, but delayed. We are supposed to have the Tokyo Democracy Forum in July, postponed. We are supposed to have the Central Asia Democracy Forum November, we don't know yet, you know. I hope if everything goes so well, and then hopefully we can meet all in the Central Asia, you know, to have a common reflection and then plan for the future. You know? Okay,
Welcome.
thank you, Yerum and Sue, who prepare all these technical logistics. Yerum, can you say one word? Because she was working behind. Yerum.
Hello.
Hello, Yerum.
Hello, Yerum. Yeah.
Thank you for your participation, and I hope to see you next week.
Next week, yeah.
Thursday.
Okay, thank you. Happy Buddha's birthday. You know, Korea is a Buddha's birthday. You know? Okay, bye-bye. Thank you. Let's give him.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ramadan. Okay, Ital, you can eat now.
Yeah,
after
okay, bye.
sunset.
Yes. Yes. Bye, Aslam.
Okay,
Bye,
bye-bye,
Sis.
Isha.
Bye, bye,
Yeah.
bye, bye,
See
bye.
ya. Bye. Dr. Sin, we couldn't hear your voice.
Yeah.
Hello, Akio. I see all the name. Aoi, Ted, Trilok, Alia, Akio, Agosh, and the Willie. Okay, bye. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.